All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, where do they preemptively let school out 2 hours early due to the possibility of a tornado? Only in Maryland, only here. I've never heard of such ever in life. Never have I ever heard of such, Lisa. How is the weather in your neck of the woods right now?
Well, you know what I think of with the tornadoes? I think of Wizard of Oz, and then also
Yes.
Tornado Alley, right? Because I'm guessing schools in
Mhm.
the Midwest in those Tornado Alley locations probably get let out in preemptively. But we
Mhm.
went from 70 degrees to 24 and snow in a 24. So I'm currently looking out at a snowstorm, and it was only supposed to snow for 2 hours this morning. It has been going since 5 a.m. So who
Now,
knows,
see,
Shauna?
that happened earlier this week where it was like 80 degrees for 2 days. And then one particular day, it was kind of overcasty rain, then snow from noon until the early afternoon. And then the sun came out, and my son got to go to practice that night like nothing ever happened. Like literally, how
Mm.
many different forms of weather can you get in 1 24 hours? That's what we got. So, whatever. Like, I just saw something earlier that said, no matter what you wear, you're bound to be overdressed and underdressed all at the same time because the weather just keeps doing its own thing. So, here we are.
Yeah, yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like when I went to the University of Vermont oh so long ago, I was told something to the effect of if you blink, the weather changes or something. And then I subsequently heard that same phrase in a variety of other states. And so every state thought they were special with saying it. And it was actually kind of a widely used phrase. And now I feel like it's probably every single state is that's
Oh,
now a
it's gotta
truism
be.
for. Yeah.
It's gotta be. It's gotta
Yeah.
be because the climate is doing what it's doing because all right, that's another podcast. Okay, that's
Yeah.
another podcast. But anyway, Lisa, take us into word of the week.
Okay, so this week I wanted to talk about the difference between Persian and Arab, since we are in a full-blown war of choice with Iran. I have a rudimentary understanding of Iranian history and the US's involvement in various coups and such. So it has a long tail of US interference even prior to 1979 and the revolution. But anyway, I listened to this 4-part episode of The Rest is History, which is a podcast, and they basically detailed that whole history up to Reagan and the hostage crisis when in 79 to 80, no, it would have been 80 to 81, when members of the US Embassy were held hostage for 444 days. Anyway, all that to say is that I think there is a lack of understanding about Iran as a country. And so one of the pieces they spent some time on was talking about Persia versus Arabia, right? And so many people think that Iran is an Arabic or an Arabian country, and it's actually not. So Iran is Persian, and then there are 22 other countries in the region, such as Kuwait, Jordan, Qatar, Palestine, Morocco, and they are Arab countries. And so Iran's language is Farsi, and then primarily the language in the Arab countries is Arabic. And then the other difference is that Iran is a majority Shia Muslim, and most of those other Arab countries are majority Sunni. And I learned a whole lot about the history there with Muhammad and his son-in-law, and then their two kids, and how Shia Islam came to be. So that was kind of interesting. But there's actually quite a distinction between Iran and all these other countries. And I think from a US perspective, we tend to just like blob them together and be like, the Middle East, they're all Arab. And even when we think about here, I was thinking about this for us, Shauna, when we do demographic identifiers in our surveys, we do say Middle Eastern or North African, right? And that's a newer categorization. But I'm even wondering if that's not helpful enough, because Arab American doesn't actually include an Iranian American, right? So I thought it was interesting, and my guess is a lot of folks don't know that difference.
Well, and the thing that I'm going to have to listen to those podcasts that you listen to in particular, just to make sure that my mind is straight around those concepts too. But the other thing that I've been trying to move away from that's connected to is what you just mentioned around using Middle East
Right.
broadly and haphazardly without
Yep.
being very clear, because what we would describe as Middle East would not be what those who live in those regions would call it. And so
Yep.
again, we're using colonizer language to talk about another
100%.
country. And so I'm just being very cautious because I would have done that in turn of phrase, and I probably will continue to make mistakes moving forward, but trying to be conscious of how I'm using that language because I know it's not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means uh, to place name geographic names that are not accurate for those who are native to that area. So for example, I'm still frustrated by people who say American when they're referring to the United States of
Yep.
America
Yep.
rather than
Yep.
North America and South America. That
Yep.
would be colonist language, colonizer language, rather than accurate geographical language. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a geography major by any stretch of the imagination, but I do want to use language that would be used by those who are native and have lived there. And so with that, we get this uh, messy Venn diagram of what native individuals would call the area versus non-native, and religion and culture all
Mm-hmm.
together, and getting
Yeah.
clearer on that as best as we can.
Yeah, that's such a great addition to this because I remember saying in a class one time, like the Middle East is middle and east of what, right?
There you
Like
go. In
what are
reference
you
to.
considering? Yeah, in reference to when you think about it's a globe, so anything could be the west, anything could
Exactly.
be the east based on where you're located. So it's such a good addition when we think about how the United States, especially, does a pretty poor job of creating those distinctions and decentering itself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And let's just put it this way. The world is a globe depending on who you're talking to, as usual. There's Shauna's petty for this episode, right? But you're bringing up a great point in relation to it, always ends up being in relation to some form of whiteness,
Yep.
Christianity,
Yep.
men, like it's always in relation to something rather than simply existing. So
Exactly.
always problematic. So yep. Oh, thank you for that. Okay, so I got homework. The podcast series that you're bringing up, and then also to kind of thinking through that Venn diagram a little bit more because you're giving me something to work with here as a
Great.
visual. Awesome, awesome. All right, well, let's dive into phase one. All right, phase one. Lisa, I have been just ready, sitting on ready to talk about this, but I'm so glad that we got delayed by other
Okay.
topics to talk about because this is once again unfolding right in front of us. Like we can't even get to the mic quick enough to talk about some of these topics. So let's talk about Target, y'all. My
All
former
right.
favorite,
Yep.
like
Mm-hmm.
adult field trip playground location,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So to make sure that I am very clear for you all who have been longtime listeners of this podcast, you know that I have sung lots of praises of Target in previous episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that was all accurate at the time.
At the time.
At
Yep.
the time, right? And so now, of course, we've had something going on since January of 2025. Lisa, I have not walked into a Target since then, since January
Yep.
of
Same.
2025.
Mm-hmm.
We are now, first quarter of 2026. I have not walked in since then, and I wouldn't have walked in then if it had not been for one of my faves, an African American woman, Tabitha Brown, who had just signed a contract and launched a kitchen houseware line there. And so I said I wanted to go in, pick up a few things to support her, but this is probably going to be my last go at Target for a
Mm-hmm.
while until we figure
Mm-hmm.
out what's going on. Okay. So that's January 2025. And there have been a number of things going on, Lisa. So I want you to kind of hold in mind Target, hold in mind the goals of the boycott, and then just
Okay.
boycotting in general.
Okay.
So what we do know is that there were four major big ticket items when it came to the boycott. You should not be having a boycott unless you're trying to make some change happen. What are those changes we're looking for? Well, We were looking for Target to reinstate some of those company-wide DEI policies that we sung praises of previously, reinstate them because they just removed many of them. Honoring their 2021 commitment to invest about $2 billion in Black-owned businesses. That's what makes that whole Tabitha Brown conversation very inconvenient, right? We'll get into that too. Investing in Black-owned banks by partnering with them. And then trying to make sure they establish retail centers at HBCUs. So you could start kind of, I'm sorry, Lisa, I'm going to learn right in front of everybody. I don't want to say grooming. I'm looking for another word. Create a pipeline for maybe
Yeah, yeah.
next generation entrepreneurs. They were trying to kind of get them into a pipeline of working with large retailers. Okay. And so here's what's interesting, Lisa. So remember my timeline. January, went in to support Tabitha Brown, bought two things, walked back out, and heard about a boycott at the beginning of February. That boycott was organized by kind of three different nonprofit organizations. Tamika Mallory of Until Freedom, Nina Turner of We Are Somebody, and Kima Levy Armstrong of the Racial Justice Network. And then one more, Jaylani Hussein of CARE Minnesota, which Minnesota is where their headquarters is, right? So all of them had already declared a boycott around these major issues, right? So that was beginning of February. End of February, Dr. Jamal Bryant, who has been a mega church pastor here in the Baltimore area, now is in Georgia. He is well known across the entirety of the Black community. Even if you don't like him, you know him, and many people support his social movement efforts. Well, Lisa, make it make sense. Okay, here we go with the splintering even within a community. You can't make it make sense, Lisa, that these four other activists, women in the mix, have declared a boycott with goals. Dr. Jamal Bryant declares what's called the Target fast. Fasting is very much connected into Black community, Christian communities, religious communities. He declared a Target fast and had a newsletter and all. It was a great way to get to data to actually have people register on his website so he could know how many people were part of the movement. And now magically in the last few weeks, Dr. Bryant is the one who says, okay, the boycott is over.
Interesting.
Excuse me, sir? You don't get to say that a boycott is over unless you are the initiator of said boycott.
Right.
Now, I understand if you are saying that your movement, that the Target Fast movement is winding down. However, I want you all to still support the other activists that are continuing the work because they have very clearly said that it's not over for them. And so I just thought it was something interesting to bring up, Lisa, because we have to kind of think through what are some effective boycotts and how even as we're doing good, there's still some problematic ways that it's showing up in the world. And so now we have gender on top of everything else, causing a bit of a headache across our community. And it's like, oh gosh, we don't need to be splintered in any way. So I'll stop there with the Target boycott issue. But I just thought it was fascinating that here we go with a very gendered issue, with a very power triggering issue. And I have to say, Lisa, I don't like it. I just don't like it. Even as I still support it, I personally don't have any plans to go back to Target at any point in the future. I've seen overwhelming numbers of people in my algorithms on all my socials that are saying, okay, Dr. Bryant, farewell to thee, but we're still not going to Target. Like, it's just been very interesting to see how people have come unraveled with the how dare you take over a movement that wasn't yours. You did a great job with your part, but you were only one part to a greater whole. How dare you? So I'm wondering how you hear that, how that lands on you.
So the four outcomes of the boycott that you articulated at the beginning, they have not been met, right?
Three of four.
Oh,
I don't think they have invested in black banks yet. I think that's the only one that's unmet.
so if they were to do that, the women that started this boycott would end it.
That's what I'm picking up from this,
Okay.
is that that was a major piece. It's kind of an all or nothing type situation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And then when I think about activist movements, this
Hmm.
doesn't feel particularly different to me in the sense of activist movements that include people of all genders. I feel like there's historical record where the men take over or take credit for things that in particular women have done. And I think that's true across all social movements, right? I do remember
Hmm.
learning about some of that through the civil rights movement with women's rights and gay rights and such. So this feels just same old in a way, which is also quite depressing that we haven't.
Hmm.
We're still running into this same issue.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And, Dr. Bryant declares, we got three out of the four. And then here come the conspiracy theories around, ooh, okay, so what happened behind closed doors? Maybe
Oh,
Dr.
interesting.
Bryant got a
Okay.
check of his own. And that was enough to have a leader to say, okay, let's back off. And with that, Lisa, if this declaration of backing off from the Target Fast arm of this movement, if that had not happened, what I was prepared to talk about with you, Lisa, was how this has continued moving forward. And every article that I saw prior to this backing off was around Target still claiming that this is an economic downturn, that they're going to refresh their offerings, their stores. So anything but say that DEI is what really has caused the downturn. Like,
Yeah.
let's avoid any type of accountability whatsoever. That's what I was prepared to talk about. Now we have a new issue, even as we're trying to solve an issue.
It's so interesting because I mean, I'm sure the economic downturn is contributing, but I mean, I remember reading stuff last year that they had big losses, right? In like quarter 3 and quarter 4, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that isn't just going to be because of the tariffs or other larger kind of macroeconomic issues, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about this 3 of the 4. So
Mm-hmm.
I realize this is a little offshoot of what you were saying, but did they? So they have responded to the women that started this by reinstituting the DEI policies and investing in black-owned businesses. Like that was a direct result of the boycott.
That seems to be a direct result of the boycott. I think the only thing that's missing now is just that the black bank investment. Now, and again, I'm like, okay, this has to be urgent. It has to be urgent, especially during a time of, to your point, yeah, there is economic downturn, but to what extent is it affecting Target? It's definitely not as much as it will always affect Black people. When the rest of the world gets a cold, we get the flu, that saying. So it's like, all right, but you still haven't done it. And that may be the most powerful of the four things that were
Yeah.
asked for economically.
So yeah, it's really. I find this so curious. So you're saying they're simply blaming it on an economic downturn when there is evidence to the contrary, but they've also relented on 3 of the 4
Mhm.
items. So they're too scared to say that because they think the president will come after them. Like
And
they,
no apology, and
yeah,
no flat out
no
apology. Yeah,
apology.
yeah.
Like we got this wrong,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We let our constituents, our consumers down, and they're not saying that. So
No, they still have not said that. And it's like, it's almost like, all right, here, fine. Like the begrudging, here's your
yeah.
three or four, but never an apology, never an acknowledgement, none of that.
So that irks me as well. Even if they had all four of them, the fact that they haven't apologized, that they haven't admitted that they made an error, and they are not going to succumb to this outrageous and
Mm-hmm.
illegal pressure from the presidential administration, kind of makes me
Mm-hmm.
not want to shop there anyway. Like in addition to why I wasn't going there, and then you add on this like male interference. it feels all. Well, you and I talk a lot about the power of the purse and
Absolutely.
where we put our money
Hmm.
tells people what our values are, right? And that's true for a state budget as much as it is you and I go into the grocery store and what we buy, what brands we buy, or whatever. And so in that sense, this boycott has been fairly successful, but not, it hasn't achieved all the aims. So I'm perplexed outside of your conspiracy theory. I'm perplexed
Hmm.
as to
Hmm.
why Jamal Bryant, right? Why he would have just said, it's done, people. I mean, outside of maleness, right?
Exactly. And it went on, for about 400 days. And I realized that there is, especially the way that he packaged it and framed it, is that it's something very distinct to say something is the target fast, knowing that people in spiritual communities understand fasting in a very specific way.
Yeah, yeah,
Usually when we think about, especially during the time of Lent, we're recording during the Christian Lenten season. That's a time where a lot of people sacrifice, give up, stop taking in certain things, whether it's food, whether it's social media. There's certain things that we stop. Me personally, I try to stop Dr. Pepper, y'all. It is a true sacrifice of, I mean, just of epic proportions. But the point being is that he was asking folks to give up
yeah,
target to make a specific point and to meet certain outcomes. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it met your outcomes,
right.
Dr. Bryant, but wouldn't it be smart and um, wouldn't it be a great way to read the room by going back to the originators of the boycott, especially those that continue to work on the ground? Because here's the other piece that deeply concerns me, Lisa, is that if you have someone with the platform the size of Dr. Bryant saying that the boycott is over,
Uh huh.
then the other activists that are still doing the work, it throws cold water on what they're
Yeah,
continuing.
yeah,
And that to me ends up being yet a third problem.
yeah,
So, or it could have been as easy as saying that the fight continues. I'm passing or I'm leaving the baton with the originators. Something other than
yeah.
it's over. Not technically, it might be over to you individually and your congregation, but it's not over to the broader Black community, allied community, consumer community. It's not over. It may never be over.
Yeah, and then consumers are going to be confused, right?
There you go. There you go. Exactly. Exactly. And so, now I'm like, I mean, there is I would say there's a very decent size slice of consumers that say, I don't care if there's a 10-point demand list of a boycott and you meet all 10. I'm still not doing it. Why? Because you played in our faces. You said
Yeah,
that
yeah,
individuals, groups, businesses, entrepreneurs were important. And then you pulled everything in a cowardly fashion to
yeah,
say, okay, they can't be more important than us being in good graces with whomever's in the White House.
yeah.
And also never admitting that um, you're a fair weather friend of DEI. That's what I consider you, a fair weather friend. As long as the weather is fair, you're cool with being down with DEI. But as soon as the weather is problematic, then you're not. No,
Yeah, which is not just a Tajay problem, is it? So we've seen
no, no,
that
no,
over
not at
and
all.
over
Right.
again. But you're 100% right. It really undercuts any commitment that they had previously made or any corporation had previously made to doing a
Mhm.
better job at being inclusive or creating equitable opportunities and outcomes. When you're like at the first sign of risk to your bottom line, you're like, nope, okay, we're going to retreat from this.
And it ended up actually being a bigger hit to their bottom line than it had to be, because
Yeah,
you know how this goes, Lisa. We say it all the time. People think, I'm just using general percentages here. People think, oh, I'm going to lose 25% of my consumers um, by doing or implementing these DEI policies, when you actually end up losing 75% by not doing it.
right.
So you actually end up losing more because you didn't realize just because they are quiet allies does not mean they're not allies. I still have friends right now who have never posted one thing on any social media platform. They have not said anything to anyone. They just literally have stopped supporting Target for a number of reasons, for black allyship reasons, and also for LGBT allyship reasons as well. They've just simply stopped, and that shows in their numbers. And so I'm interested if there was some type of consumer reporting that would be able to ask the question, is there anything that Target could do to ever bring you back?
Right.
I want to hear that percentage. I want to hear that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a larger percentage than we would like that shrug and say, I didn't even know that there was a boycott.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Right.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, all this to say, going back to what we've been saying for years now, back to Lisa's point around the power of the purse. Pay attention to how you are spending. Take a bit of time to look at the research on particular things. Yes, I have found tons of workarounds for things that I used to go there for that I don't go there anymore. Just take the time to do so because, again, I found it in many ways. Sometimes it's just better on my wallet. Sometimes it was just less expensive somewhere else anyway, from a practical perspective. But then on the other hand, it's like, are we living out the values we espouse? We're not saying that you know, other retail chains don't do the very same thing, but to do it as blatantly as Target did it is just really unconscionable. So pay attention to where you spend your hard-earned dollars.
Yeah.
All right. Take us into phase two.
Okay. So this is a deeper philosophical question I'm going to pose to you, I think, Shauna, here. So, as you know, I try to be fairly widely read. Like I don't go to the fringes, but I do try and read center or center right, and even a little bit further right than center, to just be kind of educated about different perspectives about things. And there's a columnist, an opinion columnist in the New York Times called David French, and he is a conservative evangelical writer and thinker, and he says that, but he is not in support of this current administration, and has, from what I can tell, a fairly clear moral compass. I disagree with him on a lot of kind of substantive issues, but he sees how dangerous and appalling, and insert any word you want here, this current administration is, right? So I've been reading some of his opinion columns a little bit more than maybe I would have done in the past. Anyway, he had one that came out today or yesterday, and it was called something like End Stage Polarization. And he had a couple of surveys. So last year there was a 25 country survey. It's an ethics and morality survey, and it was initiated by Pew Research, and it surveyed people in a variety of different regions. So European countries, Asian countries, African countries, and American countries, continent-wise. And of all of that, the US was the only country where a majority of adults, 53%, so just a slight majority of adults, said the morality of their fellow citizens was either bad or somewhat bad. So no other country out of so the other 24 countries all had a minority of people that said that. The US was the only one where it tipped over 50% of people saying that about their fellow citizens. And some of the countries that were in there have had recently a fairly tumultuous time, like either civil war, there's been some insurgency, or it's not been particularly stable. And even in countries where there's kind of conflict and instability, people were still not saying, to the degree that the US was, that their fellow citizens were bad or somewhat bad. And then, so that's 2025. But a few years before that, Pew did another survey where they found that large shares of Democrats and Republicans found each other to be closed-minded, dishonest, immoral, and unintelligent. And those measures have been getting worse and worse every year. So the percentage of people based on those party affiliations that are saying the other group is those things is getting bigger and bigger. And then in that same 2022 survey, Republicans were more likely to believe that Democrats were dishonest, immoral, and lazy. And so he was making the point that if I think someone else is immoral and lazy, no, sorry, wrong way around. if I think that this other person thinks I am immoral and lazy, I am more likely to say that they are immoral and lazy. So we end up mirroring each other, like this psychological thing that happens where we end up mirroring it. It's not based on anything. It's based on what I think you think of me, and so therefore I think that of you, right? So ridiculous. And so kindness and tolerance is seen as a threat, right? So then he references James Tallarico. So James Tallarico won the primary in Texas for the Senate race where he'll be going up against John Cornyn or Ken Paxton. And so James Tallarico, for those who don't know, he's a white man. He is a religious white man, but he is progressive. David French is a white man, religious, but conservative, right? But James Tallarico, I guess, was interviewed after his win, and he said something to the effect of, faith teaches me to love my neighbor as myself. I'm tired again about this environment where we're pitted against our neighbors. And then I have a direct quote here. That old politics that we've been suffering under for the last 10 years, politics as blood sport, as trolling, as owning, as total war, that politics is dying. So that's what James Tallarico said. I'm not 100% sure I agree with him on that. But anyway, David French then wrote a piece about that, agreeing with James Tallarico's sentiment that kindness should prevail, that to be a true Christian means that we're not attacking each other, we're not thinking each other is immoral, etc., right? So then in this newest opinion, he then talked about the response he got from evangelical Christians about his agreement with James Tallarico on being kind to people. And the evangelical response he described as quote unquote volcanic. And he got told that he was a heretic, that he must have a brain injury, that he is putting the soul of evangelicalism at risk, and that he is elevating niceness over justice and righteousness, and that niceness is dangerous. So in his agreement with a progressive about how we treat each other, and that James Tallarico treats people as he would understand a Christian should treat people, his former team, evangelical Christians, attacked him for being a heretic. Anyway, all that to say is that this is where his kind of thesis comes from, that are we at this end stage of polarization where these divides are getting so bad and they are irreconcilable? And he is saying that if we call for decency, that doesn't deny the depth of our disagreements, but it denies the humanity of our opponents when we're not decent. And so he is concerned that we are at a point of almost no return where we are, as a culture, incapable, a majority of people, not everyone, incapable of recognizing the humanity of people we disagree with. And then he ends his piece with, unless we seek justice and mercy, we will be left with neither. So I thought it was just an interesting, because he's not, I wouldn't call him particularly hyperbolic or alarmist, but for him to feel like we are at a place where there might not be a return, I thought was thought-provoking. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on this, especially as someone who is, deeply involved with your faith and kind of your understanding of Christianity, which is obviously not my frame. So what do you think?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, well, to kind of go back to what was mentioned near the beginning, where it was, part of the two laws that hang all the law and the prophets, meaning that everything, the foundation of Christianity hangs on two things: loving the Lord your God with all your heart,
okay,
and loving your neighbor as yourself. And I can't remember who said this, but I overheard this on another podcast. And it was a Christian minister that was saying, and someone they definitely would be deemed as extreme liberal. He said the problem with the Decalogue, or those two, is that you can't really love your neighbor as yourself when you don't love yourself first. And we're now living in a culture where people don't love themselves for a lot of reasons. They don't deem themselves of high esteem for any reason at all. I think part of it is commercialized. I think part of it is capitalism. There's a lot of reasons why people don't think too highly of themselves. I'll put that on another episode shelf for another day. And also, I think what gets really interesting is that when you don't know or see healthy models of love, then it's hard to
Right.
show that type of
Mm-hmm.
neighborly love to someone else that you certainly don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that's one big bucket of things to think about is what does love reflected with our neighbors and community look like? We don't know. A lot of people don't know. They have no model for it. They don't even have a starting point for it. Most of what I would suggest a lot of conservative Christians see as love is the most hateful bullshit I've ever seen.
Mm. Okay.
So to me, that's why I'm like, I'm not sold on the notion that a lot of religious people, especially American Christian religious folks, understand what love even is. I just don't.
Mm. Okay.
Even in so many different parables and parables and stories of Jesus, that they will twist it into something completely different. They
Mm.
don't see the hypocrisy of what it is. It's so you mean to tell me that you're going to talk about the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, but you don't understand how that connects directly to SNAP and not feeding people in
Yeah.
this country?
Yeah.
Like there's so many. I mean, there's countless stories that I can compare to right now. So that's one thing. The second thing that I would say, at least this is good timing because I'm working with a particular client, and it's a bunch of folks that are professionally trained to think in binaries, right or wrong, yes or no. There's a simple solution. And you and I would suggest is we don't fit into those molds or models. Like
Mm.
there's never a, yes, there may be things that we see as completely wrong, but at the same time, there's so many gradients of right. You know,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
one thing or another. And that binary thinking, unfortunately, we have a lot of infrastructure that encourages that binary thinking, all the way from little bitties up to adults. We've talked about it ad nauseum about how folks, even children, are not taught to think critically. There's more than one right answer to this. And so, with that, we have a country that's being educated in such a way that they can't think of more of a menu
Mm.
of options to anything, much less weigh those options, pros, cons,
Right.
good, bad, or indifferent, and then actually apply them. All that connects to critical thinking. And so with that, I think I'm in the same camp as him to say, I think I agree, because there's so much infrastructure that doesn't allow, encourage, or teach people to think outside of binaries. You're wrong and I'm right. You're
Mm.
crazy, I'm sane. You're a heretic, I'm faithful. Like everything is a binary. And so when you have people that are literally incapable of thinking in ways that are outside of the binary, then how are we supposed to expect them to come together on their own, much less in a facilitated environment, to think about what all the options may be? I'm brokering something with a client right now, and there's a couple of folks that think in very binary ways.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them mentioned, I'm using this broadly because obviously confidentiality and keeping things as quiet as possible. The notion was either this program works or not in our company. So if the program doesn't work, then why are we doing it? If the program does work, then why are we fooling with it? It was just like this binary thinking
Right.
the whole time. And I invited them to think, what if the program is good, but this process is taking your good to great?
Yeah.
You could see like the blood draining out of their faces. Like, I just never thought, I just thought it was either good or bad. It was either we're going to
Mm.
keep it or we're not. And then there was another instance where we were specifically talking about either the data is speaking positively of this program or it's speaking negatively of the program. I was like, Lord, where's Lisa? Because she gonna bust that wide open and say, we actually can be speaking to both. There may be aspects of it that are performing well and other aspects are not. Let's look at the interplay of both of them. Like there is no, it's kind of like it's kind of like you go into a restaurant and you think you only have two dishes to choose from. Like when you go to a wedding sometimes, like they give you,
Yeah.
one thing or
Yep.
the other. And it's like, you actually got a whole buffet if you just think a little bit differently. But you have to have people that do that either from a skilled perspective or naturally. I think that we always live in the gray. Like there are lots of things that I absolutely don't agree with, but there's lots of gradients of things that I think, oh, many of those could work. We just aren't trained or encouraged to think that way. So I think I agree with them, Lisa.
But do you feel like this is, I mean, you grew up here, obviously. I've only been here for half of my life, but do you feel like this has always been the case? This binary thinking? I mean, for some, perhaps yes, but the degree to which we're seeing it now, the lack of critical thinking, the binary thinking, the this or the that, the right or the wrong, right? Like, has that gotten worse? Because generationally, people who are our age and older would have had a different education system, right? So we, lament how kids now are not getting taught to critically think, but that isn't true for the 30, 40, 50, 60 year old necessarily.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think here's the thing. I think you're right that we've all been taught how to think differently based on the generations. Absolutely
Mm-hmm.
agree. And at the same time, I feel like when you have a dimmer switch on a light or you
Mm-hmm.
have the volume on the radio, I feel like the volume has turned up over the years. The light has been brightened over the years. And so I still think that there's been disagreement, of course, all along, but the deep roots of those disagreements to the point of being irreconcilable. Like, think about even the things we've talked about on this podcast and some stuff we haven't talked about on this podcast. There's evidence of irreconcilable differences throughout this country.
Mm-hmm.
People who are no longer in relationship with one another, whether it's by marriage or by adult children, adults, parents of adult children. There's so many different ways that schisms are showing up right now, and much of it is connected with our political climate, but some of it is just connected to no one is willing to come to a point of reason.
Mm.
They're not even willing to come to the table. I'm not saying like we don't even have, this is how allergic we are to coming to a common table. We don't even want to come to a common table to get clear on what we disagree on, much less any agreement.
Right.
So people are all walking around even thinking that they're clear on what we disagree on when actually we're not. Many people are not
Mm.
clear on what we disagree on. So I see it from the micro level to the macro
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, it just, I feel very strongly about some things, certainly, but do I demonize a person? Like, so pro choice, I believe in that deeply, right? But do I demonize someone who is pro life? I mean, or anti abortion, right? Like, I understand how they get there, but to say that they are unethical, immoral, unintelligent, lazy, like, I just feel like I don't know what does that do? You know?
Well, every time I hear something like that or read something like that, especially on social media, it's adults that are pulling up childhood name calling like they would, on a playground. It's like, okay,
Mm,
so you don't have the skill sets to engage with
right,
me around what we disagree on. So the easiest thing for me to do is vilify you. So then I don't have to engage with you.
right, right.
If you're a bitch very quickly, then I don't have to engage with you around why we disagree on pro life, pro choice, or whatever. For the record, Lisa and I agree. I'm just using that as an example. But
Yeah.
it's the easiest thing to do is, in order for me to excuse myself from having to engage in thinking, critical thinking, dialogue, and conversation, I would rather call you a name.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier. And so that name then ends up triggering you so that then you call me a name back. And yay, I got out of having a critical thinking conversation.
Right, because they're harder. Yeah.
They're harder. Yes, it's easier to call you whatever than to engage around a topic that I don't want to have to defend. And I would also suggest, I remember this was, oh gosh, over 20 years ago, where I was doing research on children of LGBT couples. And one of the most profound things that I read about was that those children, especially school age children, ended up being some of the kids that performed with the highest scores on testing, assessment, and critical thinking assessments of any sort in school because they've spent the majority of their life having to think critically about how they identify
Yeah.
as a family in their existence. People that have never had to defend or describe
Mm-hmm.
their existence don't have to think that deeply about things. That would be, I'll use myself as an example. I never had to think critically about Christian theology from any angle until I got outside of my Christian
Mm.
house of worship circle community. Once I went outside of that, and then I engaged with friends of mine that were outside of the Christian community but still in theological community, I had to think more critically about who I am, how I know what I know, and why I believe what I believe. Until you
Yeah.
are challenged, you don't have to do that when you're in a majority community.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to defend, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. I don't have to defend Jesus' existence and purpose outside of the community that takes that as literal gospel truth. I don't have to do it until I engage with someone who is Muslim or someone who is agnostic or some what have you.
Yeah.
And so that's the key, is let me hide out in my community so I never have to think critically, and it's just easier to call you a name.
Yeah. I just don't understand how someone could call David French a heretic because he's arguing in essence that we should be kinder and nicer to each other and be decent, right? Like it feels mind-blowing to me, but
Well, remember, we had somebody that said that empathy was weak.
yeah, true, true. Yeah, so I guess we've diagnosed the problem over and over again, and it's just, what we lack is a solution, because if you and David French are correct that the end is nigh, that we are there with end stage polarization, and how do we come back from that cliff edge? I don't have an answer for that, but maybe we'll save that brainstorming for another day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the connections. I mean, decency. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I am very shy about civility just because I know that depending on what lens you're using with civility, it's been used to calm
Mm-hmm.
savages, and we
Yes,
know
yes.
who was considered savage. So I get the shying away from the civility piece, but decency. I mean, that's just
Mm-hmm.
basic treating someone as a human being. Come on,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
I just I don't know. But again, that also I'll just use my black lens really quickly. At the same time, some people are going to see decency as heretical because there are some of us that they've never considered human either.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Why should I exercise the ability to treat you as a human being when I never saw you as such to begin with?
Right. And yeah, it's heresy to ask me to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. There you go. Absolutely. So as much as I hate to agree with that sentiment, I think I do, just because of major, major systems, not individuals, major, major systems. And I find the people like you and I that are willing to engage even with people that we disagree with, it becomes so laborious for us to do it that we end up hiding out because it feels exhausting to us, but
Yeah.
uh, uh, how can I say it's exhausting to us, so it's draining our energy, but then it's giving contradictory folks more energy.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it revs them up to call us fill in the blank.
Yeah.
So I'm not interested in revving folks up that are
Right. Right.
decided upon disagreeing with me before I've
Yeah.
even opened my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So
All right.
So, what I would say, as we've been saying before, Lisa, I do think this does have an action item that we're just repeating from before, continuing to foster critical thinking, especially among young people.
Yeah.
Think about things from more than one angle.
Yeah.
Um, there's always been this kaleidoscope method of thinking where you take a very basic case and then you use that case and think about it through a different lens, through the lens of an African American, the lens of a woman, the lens of someone who's Muslim, the lens of whatever. It's the same core, but from different angles. We don't do that. We just, here's the core, it is what it is, move on, make a decision. And that's not real life. So continue to push critical thinking, y'all.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's it. I've been sitting on that target conversation for a long time, and you and I have been
Oh,
talking about critical thinking for a long time. So
we
we
sure
need to
have.
address it.
Yeah.
So that's a wrap for this week's episode of Unfazed Unedited. Please reach out to us on our social media platforms. You can find us on all your favorite podcast apps at Unfazed Unedited. Email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com, or just visit our website for all the things, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can access both the old and the new shows. So if you like this week's episode, please continue to subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. So stay away from Target, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. See you next week.